Welcome to Breaking Bread, a podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Today I've got with me Arlen Miller. Welcome to the show, Arlen.
It's good to be here.
We're going to talk about, I think, a very pertinent topic today, Arlen, and one that I think our listeners will identify with. And to set the stage, and before I give way to that topic, I'd like to just recall the well-known story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. So if we recall that story, this is right after Christ's death, that now we have Cleopas and his friend walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, which is, some 7-mile journey, a couple hour stroll, and they are just dejected and they are despondent about what has taken place that Passover. Here they expected Jesus to be something that he didn't materialize on. And we have phraseology there that says, Cleopas says, but we trusted in him, and he was a prophet mighty indeed, and he was supposed to redeem Israel. You could see, you could get a sense that as they walked this road, they had expectations that were not met. Arlen, what are we going to talk about today?
That's exactly what we are going to talk about. They had built up a picture of what was supposed to happen in their minds. And it wasn't a wrong picture. It wasn't a bad picture. It was a picture where they had envisioned a scenario that just did not develop. And often we'll find that in our life, we can have that same type of situation. We have a vision or a picture of what is supposed to happen. This job promotion is supposed to come through. This marriage proposal is supposed to go the way that I want it to go. Our family is supposed to develop. We're supposed to have kids at a certain time or so on and so forth. And then for whatever reason, nobody's fault, nothing wrong, but for whatever reason, those expectations do not materialize.
And in the case of Cleopas and his friend, it was intertwined in their faith. Here they had faith in Christ. I mean, isn't that exactly what we're supposed to have? And even in the examples that you cited, a lot of times those things are cradled in faith, and yet it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. There's a redirection, there's a change, there's something that does not materialize.
Now, Arlen, can we also think about it on a much more local scale than those deep and heavy things?
Right.
I think going to Walt Disney World. Oh my goodness, we save up for this, right? And good grief, we're going to have a great time. And if we don't have a great time, and if this doesn't work out, and if we don't have these passes or whatever it is, I'm just thinking of my kids.
Yeah.
Expectation. We manage.
Most definitely.
We have to manage expectations.
Yes, and then the kids are sick for the first 3 times, or it rains, or it's cold, or something, and the expectations do not materialize the way they do, we think that they should. And it can be you can have this gap between expectations and reality, and managing that gap is a critical skill that we often overlook.
I've heard the phrase said that expect little, be disappointed little. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's a connection between our expectation and our disappointment level, so to speak.
Very much so. Very much so.
So next time you're going on vacation, just prep the kids. It's going to be awful. We're just not going to have a good time at all. We'll just be away for about a week or so.
That's exactly right, Matt.
It's going to rain the whole camping trip. It's just going to rain, and we're going to be stuck in the tent together. Just expect that.
Exactly right.
What do we want to accomplish with this podcast, Arlen? What do we want to help our listeners with?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that we'd like to really, really accomplish, a couple of purposes. Number one, I think we want to acknowledge that this exists, that there is such a thing as unmet expectations, that it's normal, that it's real, that most of us at some point in our life will go through such a situation. That's a huge thing to understand and to appreciate, that what I am experiencing has been experienced and will be experienced from the Bible times on to now and in the future. And I think the second thing that we would like to accomplish is just some practical ways to think through those scenarios, to frame up your world, so to speak, so that you have the proper lens to view these times and to interpret these times.
I think our listeners understand what we mean by unmet expectations, as we have already illustrated it in deep and heavy things, but also in things that are more insignificant or light. But it is a type of loss, right? What do we mean by, I guess, a loss, and how is an unmet expectation a loss?
Unmet expectations is a type of loss. The technical term is ambiguous loss, a loss that is hard to define, or a loss that's brought on by absence of something. It is the fact that you are feeling loss for what didn't happen, as opposed to what we usually think of when you feel loss for something that did happen.
So let's set that next to a non-ambiguous loss would be maybe the loss of a child or a loss of a spouse. It's very clear in that sense that a person has experienced a loss, and we rally around those people in those situations. And so we can easily internalize them ourselves that, oh, this is indeed a loss. But this being an ambiguous loss is a little bit more cloudy and therefore perhaps goes under the radar. Is that true?
Very much so, on two different levels. Number one, the individual going through that doesn't even really understand or realize, why am I feeling sad? Why am I grieving? Why am I experiencing some of the same emotions and feelings that I would experience if there was a defined loss in my life? They don't really feel like this is appropriate to feel this way.
Well, let's put some examples for our listeners just to flesh this out a bit more. So a couple who are struggling with infertility.
Right.
They don't know. There's a huge loss there.
There's a hole.
There's a hole there, but it's an ambiguous loss. Or I had hoped for a promotion and that job opening went to somebody else. I struggle with that. But again, I'm not even really sure what that would have meant in my life and how that would have. So I don't even know exactly what the loss is. It's just it didn't happen.
Right.
Are those good examples?
Very much so. Another one that I think is huge to recognize, or very large to recognize, is around the area of marriage. Whether you maybe have not gotten married, even though that's been a desire, a godly desire of your heart for a period of time, or you've pursued marriage and it did not work out in your favor. Those are both areas where you are grieving what did not happen. You are grieving the whole of something that you had expected to emerge and did not emerge.
Frequently, I think we would say that loss gives rise to grief. And if we're defining this as a loss, we are saying that it's okay to grieve, and there is a grieving that is necessary, perhaps for unmet expectations. Is that fair to say?
Very much so. That is a very important piece to realize.
What does grief look like then with unmet expectation situation?
Often grief will take a lot of the same forms that you would see in a typical grieving type situation. There'll be a period of anger. There'll be a period of protesting against what did not happen in this case. That can turn into despair or detachment if allowed to continue on. And ultimately, hopefully, if that grieving process goes to its proper end, there will be a sense of acceptance, which I know will be an area that we'll continue to talk about. You know, and Matt, one of the things that makes this situation so difficult is that this type of grief is often associated with something we would call disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief is different than most situations, in the sense that many people will not understand, why are you grieving or what are you going through? It's not a publicly recognized thing. No one perhaps knows, except for maybe your closest friends, that you suffered through a miscarriage, or that you're struggling with infertility, or that you were passed over for the job promotion, or that the marriage proposal did not go the way that you had hoped it would go. A lot of these grief type situations continue on in silence to the outside world, and that can be extremely, extremely hard.
Which sets it apart from those previously mentioned losses, which are very open,
very public,
very obvious to everybody. Because part of grieving is that support, right, that we get from others who know that we are grieving, but these are for unobvious reasons that we are grieving. And it seems inappropriate, perhaps, to grieve outward in the way that we would grieve for a loss of a child. It would seem inappropriate maybe to grieve outward in that sense for infertility, for example, because people aren't putting those pieces together.
Correct.
So that adds a layer of challenge to this, doesn't it?
The body of Christ, through no fault of their own, very likely might not know that there's a difficult time to rally around. And so the individuals will find themselves walking through this what seemingly alone at times. And that's a whole another layer of encouragement that we would like to offer to build up.
And really encourage the church to be
sensitive.
To be more sensitive, right.
To be aware.
There seems to be another layer of difference here when it comes to grief with an ambiguous loss and an unambiguous loss. For the unambiguous loss, where that loss is very clearly, whether it be the loss of a child or a loss of a job, where that's marked in time, it seems like we know when to start to grieve. Is there an element here with an ambiguous loss, these things that didn't materialize, where part of the grief is, should I be grieving? Is it time to grieve? Maybe we will have children. Maybe I will still get that promotion. I'm on waiting. How long will I wait until I realize God said no? Did he say no? Should I start to grieve?
The waiting can be one of the most difficult pieces of this. The unknown can be an extremely difficult piece. And you don't have that clarity of a point in time.
It takes me back to the story that we started with Cleopas and his friend on this journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus. When did it occur to them? Jesus isn't going to pull this thing out. At some point in time, this grief settled in on them. And that's when they started to deal with it. So as we review upon today, as we talked about unmet expectations and understand it in terms of a loss, a unique type of loss, which gives rise to a unique type of grief, provides, I think, an understanding for us as we look into our own hearts and we look into the hearts of our congregation. And we also think about how we might manage expectations. So the next time we're taking the kids to Grandma and Grandpa's house, we're going to say, kids, we're going to Grandma and Grandpa's house. We're going to have an awful time. It's not going to be any fun at all. So just expect little and maybe
set those expectations way low, way low.
Well, I think, Arlen, we've got a lot to recover in upcoming podcasts so that we can redeem this topic, and we intend to do so. In the next topic or in the next episode, we're going to talk about maybe a larger understanding, a biblical understanding that might help us with dealing with unmet expectations. And so until then, listeners, thanks for being with us today. Have a great day.